everyone. My name is Alexandre Pacheco da Silva, and this is Law and Technology series, a set of interviews with incredible scholars to discuss the impacts of new technologies in the legal field. I am a law professor at São Paulo Law School at Getúlio Vargas Foundation, and one of the coordinators of the Center for Education and Research in Innovation. Today, we have Professor Claudia Pagliari from University of Edinburgh, where she is a senior researcher and educator based in the Usher Institute. She's active across the Center for Population Health Services, Population Health Sciences, the Center for Medical Informatics, the Edinburgh Global Health Academy, and the Institute for Science, Technology, and Innovation. Professor Claudia Pagliari is founder and director of the MSc in Global eHealth and co-founder, team leader of the NHS Digital Academy. Also contributes to data ethics, MOOC, the Professional Development Program in Health Data Science, and the Data Controversies Lecture Series. She has developed courses in global eHealth, public health informatics, the ethics and governance of eHealth, the business of eHealth, and citizen-centered digital health, among others. Professor Claudia Pagliari is also a visiting lecturer in digital health ethics at the Imperial College London, the Open University, and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. She directs the interdisciplinary research group in eHealth, while mainly focused on digital health. Her research crosses topics, methods, and theories from diverse areas, including health technology assessment, science and technology study, biomedical ethics, management science, data science, and policy studies. Thank you very much again to accept our invitation and to agree to be a part of this project. So, Professor Pagliari, our interview is divided into 3 questions. The first one, it is, how is technology impacting the legal field in your perspective?
Thank you. Well, obviously, this is a very big question, and one could be developing entire courses about it, but I will give you a few thoughts of the headline issues, I think, here. I mean, for a start, technologies are bringing new legal responsibilities to the fore, and they're also increasing the existing challenges. These include areas such as the ownership of intellectual property, or physical property, or money and financial assets. So there are new responsibilities that these new forms of information sharing and storage of ownership information and transactional information is being embodied in these systems, which really puts a pressure on those with legal responsibilities for those aspects of business or other aspects of our life in which this happens forward, and creates these new duties and responsibilities on the users and the developers, but also on the lawyers themselves. I think also technology is impacting the legal field in terms of its the new harms that are being developed around technology. And we certainly see that a lot with the alleged harms of social media, for example, some of which are, can be traced to specific events or specific statements or specific bad actors. We have seen, for example, the Capitol riots in the United States, for example, would be one bad example. The spread of health misinformation during the pandemic would be another one. Deliberate health misinformation or really disinformation in those, which can lead to harm. The marketing of medicines which are fake medicines, or advice claiming to be medical that isn't medical, which leads to actual physical harms. But those harms can also be implied harms, for example, effects on society, which are harder for lawyers to engage with, because sometimes until an actual event occurs, that you have something tangible to call a harm, is quite difficult to create policies around that, and for that to engage with the legal advice. But those harms are there, as well as those kind of more property and business issues. And I think also it's increasing challenges around corporate and governmental duties to protect data, in particular, in relating to citizens' privacy in particular. And also at the same time, they have duties to use that data in order to provide better services, for example, which can create a conflict that can set up these ethical tensions, and those ethical tensions can lead to sort of political debate, and do really require pinning down with some sort of legal and regulatory structure that can take a long time to negotiate, and also requires quite a lot of new knowledge often. And likewise around the data, that we are increasingly exposed to the potential for so-called algorithmic discrimination. As we utilize the data, we process it in ways that give us more insight and knowledge and ability to predict things, or ability to really discriminate more successfully between certain outcomes or certain groups. It can also create insights that then those insights may be inaccurate because they're based on false or misleading algorithms or dirty data, which is processed through the machine without due human scrutiny. But they can also lead to insights which are hard to accept because they are discriminatory by their nature, and then we need other sets of laws around them, so which are to prevent the misuse of that information, and may require the masking of information in an environment where you need transparency as well. So these are not easy matters, and legal brains are very useful for helping to sort that out. And I say corporate and governmental because often these things are being done by governments and those enacting government policy, and very often they're being done by corporations, which are, and this is sometimes they have slightly different frameworks around them in terms of their legal expectations. Some are universal around data protection, and others are more nuanced to do with corporate governance versus good governance in a public sector organization, for example, that also, really need to be disentangled. So there's that sort of cluster of new responsibilities. And kind of linked to that, these emergence of these innovations and technologies also creating a need for more training and transformation of the legal industry itself. For example, such as the use of a blockchain in contracts, for example, or uses of AI for reviewing evidence, where you might be able to actually improve your speed of and accuracy of information gathering and information filtering through the use of these technologies, for example, which requires skills. Alongside other kinds of digital forensics, which we've been obviously using for a long time and are increasingly used. And some of those forensics themselves come with legal challenges. For example, the use of technologies by police forces that can overcome your password settings and just have a look at your phone. Now, that may be useful in a serious and organized crime, perhaps not so useful in a rape case, for example. There have been debates in the UK and I believe elsewhere in the so-called digital rape concept, where the victim ends up having their private life exposed through these technologies, which is, affecting their rights. And of course, so there we have a tension with the right to privacy and also other kinds of, women's rights, for example, around these technologies at the same time as trying to create evidence that you want to look for evidence that this person may have been implicated in the event themselves. So those are that's been occupying quite a lot of attention in terms of digital forensics, and more we're seeing even in the UK the big debate at the moment is around whether we should remove the absolute encryption of certain communication devices in order to protect children from harm or to prevent illicit activities. And of course, at the same time, that's removing something that people had before in terms of their privacy. So again, these create a need for legal students and practitioners to really keep on top of things, to really understand, well, what is going on here? And cut through what is simply political narratives, which tend to sort of overblow one side or the other, and actually get to the facts. What does this technology actually do? Where are the, where are the switches in the system, and in what ways can they be appropriately managed to ensure the benefits without and minimize the risks? So, and also, I was just thinking back still, I'm sort of question number one here. Digitization also brings, it also relates to all the papers that the legal profession has dealt with in the past. And this is a good thing in many ways, although it does create some risks around cybersecurity, for example, but also around potential attacks that you could lose all of your legal documents, which really absolutely require that intersection between engineering, informatics, and the legal system to lock that one down. But also it creates new opportunities for, and therefore duties for, accountability and transparency. So in future, sort of certain decision-making chains will not be able to, they can't shuffle the papers and kind of pretend it just happened. There will be a much more accountable chain. And if a bad advice is being given, for example, or some process hasn't been followed, then that will become clearer, and that also creates new liabilities potentially for legal industry. And then of course we've also seen, particularly in the COVID, new technologies like video conferencing being used actually in courtroom type settings to deliver evidence and gather evidence, and they've brought their own challenges as well. We heard about people getting so used to being at home in the pandemic they were turning up to court in their underwear. And the judges here had to sort of clamp down on that and say, dress up nicely, you're in a serious place. Just because you're on your sofa doesn't mean things are going to change. So anyway, these are just a few thoughts that came to my mind answering that first question.
That was wonderful. Very interesting answer regarding topics, not only in terms of thinking about new types of responsibilities in dealing with technology, but also with several examples that illustrate that, in my view at least, can show us how technology could create different types of problems that could be addressed in one area. So my next question for you, Professor, it is about a field that we can call law and technology. In your view, do you think that we are ready, we are mature enough to think about a field of study that we can call law and technology? Is there a field of study that we can call law and technology?
Yes, I think we are ready, and I think it's necessary. I think probably the biggest challenge would be that there are many subfields in many different disciplines that like to brand themselves as doing law and technology. Either they're studying laws about technology, or lawyers that deal with technology, or they're lawyers studying technology, or they are other people that just happen to look at some sort of area of intersection. So sociology, policy researchers, legal practitioners, regulatory experts who are not always lawyers, but are often on top of these things. They all have a slightly different view of the elephant. So I think probably my recommendation in this field for it would be to actually just engage with the elephant and recognize that for this to function successfully, it has to have some high-level aims. It has to have a clear kind of purpose, but it also has to be inclusive and inclusive, interdisciplinary, but also cross-disciplinary. I think needs to be a real strength of this field. And so, yes, I think, and there are universities that have law courses called things like law and technology already. But as I said, they tend to vary quite a lot. And I'm not sure internationally whether there is a standard for that. Perhaps that's something to work towards, and then say, well, here is perhaps a proposed international curriculum for sort of core competencies in law and technology. What are the expectations from all of these dimensions that I mentioned earlier, the effect of law on, the effect of things on law, and so forth, which, how, in particular, I think the need for agility, and, that's actually, harder because the legal training is quite often quite vertical, not necessarily, certainly in early phases, prone to this agile thinking and cross-referencing, because obviously there's so much information and so much procedure and so many sort of written, documents to absorb. I think it needs to be a safe space where people can really sort of thresh out those issues together and then think about what the implications for the law are. So, so the obviously high-level things, and I think in a law school, it would need to be, the legal needs for the legal future and current legal system would need to take priority. But below that, of course, all of these other things would need to be included. And I think so there's a very long way of saying that, yes, I agree that there is a need for this, that there are many things branding themselves that, and probably perhaps that would be a good paper to write for your group is, what would be the core requirement, or perhaps do an international consensus development process as a piece of research, to maybe a Delphi process or something to work out what would be appropriate. Obviously, every university can create their own version with their own nuances. We already do that. But if there was an agreement and an association, then clearly that would make life a lot easier. And it would also assure corporations hiring people or governments appointing people that they are all singing from the same hymn sheet, or at least they have a core competency set with them, as well as this, I said, agility and adaptability, which is more of a mindset, more of a digital mindset.
Very interesting, Professor. And one thing that I would like to actually hear from you regarding that topic, it is that we discuss a lot about what universities and especially law schools supposed to do regarding the complexity of our world, the impacts of technologies in the legal field, so on and so forth. And usually, as you mentioned before, usually the first thing that law schools do, it is to create a course with different types of approaches. For example, discussing the regulation of internet, discussing regulation of AI, discussing, for example, ways to regulate blockchain, or to structure in, for example, traditional courses as contracts. What would be the implications of using blockchain as a way to develop smart contracts, for example. So we have different initiatives, and you mentioned that one important thing to actually try to discuss, it is an international approach. So I would like to actually ask you our third and final question for this interview. What, in your view, should a law school do regarding the impacts of technology in the legal field? Because there are they are actually creating courses. But is there anything else that would impact and provide a better legal training for their students?
Well, I think perhaps just picking up on the earlier point, I think one needs to be careful not to just stick it all in one course and then say that's ticked that box. It needs to be a whole system approach. So every course, we've learned this from medicine over the years, just sticking everything in the kind of technology box is nice, but it doesn't really solve the problem. You have to get it in right from the start, and making sure all of the lecturers are, engaged with this idea of bringing in, thinking of whatever they're teaching, whether they're using a technology in it, they can use that as a learning experience, whether they are talking about their subject, they should also be bringing in modern examples in which technology features either something that's been used to support that practice, or something that practice has implications for the technology or its use in society. So yeah, I would say that first of all. But I think also, just reflecting what I said before, in order for an law school to be sufficiently agile, it also needs to engage in that sort of interdisciplinary collaboration that's necessary to really glean the knowledge and experience that's been gained from other disciplines, and also the different mindset, the different ways of thinking about opportunities, risks, and implications that come from different fields. For example, it's easy to talk about data protection and then apply that to a particular case, for example, but without having sometimes say a sociological perspective where you can look forward to say, well, what are the other societal implications of this sort of control? We saw it during COVID, the lockdowns and all of these sorts of things. Sometimes you have decisions that are necessary because there's an urgent situation. Sometimes it's not so urgent, but people think it's generally a good idea, and they're thinking proximally, they're thinking now, and they're not necessarily thinking forward. So that more, I guess we call it the responsible innovation field, has quite a lot to offer that in terms of anticipating things ahead. So that working collaboratively, not just, what we've also seen in research over the years, as well as in efforts in some sorts of interdisciplinary teaching, have actually just been tokenistic representations, and everyone gets their 5 minutes of fame. They don't really come together. And I've seen these longer projects and longer activities like this data ethics course, for example, but also longer projects like a big one I was involved in called Sociamp, about the science and practice of social machines, which went on for about 5 years. And it was heavily computer science, and then it brought in more people interested in ethical and regulatory issues and psychology and all sorts of things. And by the end of it, people were able to converse in each other's language and really think about this whole. And it would be nice if you could do that at the end of someone's undergraduate career, but or also in the course of any other research activity or even innovation activity that's come out of a university. So I guess that's a long way of saying this, but it's interdisciplinary, but it's got to be real interdisciplinary. It's got to mean something, but also respecting each other's discipline and as well. And so I think also, obviously, creating more courses in technology and in data as an ethical, legal, and regulatory challenge, and they might fall into different courses, as well as the course about all the kind of futuristic stuff. What might we be doing in 10 years' time as lawyers? What might we be using? For example, who could have anticipated ChatGPT and its various associates, which are not without their difficulties? We just as evidence has flaws, we see that could actually, potential for that could increase quite dramatically, even particularly if we set it loose on genetic data, for example. It could get things wrong, or it could be biased in some way, but at the same time, it could be extremely useful. So where do we want to be? But I would say what should a law school do regarding the impacts of technology in the legal field? And once it's done all this other stuff, what it really needs to do is contribute to policy discussions that will enable early warnings of challenges that require or may require new laws or changes to laws. And they need to ensure that government has the best advice possible when formulating new technology policies to ensure that human rights are protected and the rule of law is followed while this is taking place. And the example of some of the examples during COVID show how sometimes rule of law was not adhered to when awarding big public contracts for things that proved to be ineffective, or when, pushing forward an app that was giving false information, was politically driven, for example. So those things are about accountability. So lawyers need to be pushing on that side to ensure due diligence, accountability, and so forth, but also helping in a constructive manner to, policymakers and politicians as well. And they're not the same thing necessarily. They like to think they're making all the policy, but just to get them a little bit more up to speed with this. And I think possibly one of the best ways to do that is really remind them of their liabilities, and not just their duties, but they're also liabilities if they don't adhere to those duties or responsibilities. But also you'll find that most civil servants and things that are trying to put together policies like this generally want them to work, and they're generally trying to make things better, but they don't always have the information at their disposal, or they're sometimes pushed by different entities into rushing forward with certain things without necessarily having that advice. And often, corporations are much more legally staffed up than governments are, and the workload may be equal or higher in government. And so that sort of support and engagement is, I think, really critical. And that's really where we all talk about academic impact. That's where the impact comes. It's not really anymore just about how many papers you can publish or which journals. At the end of the day, that doesn't really matter. What matters is, have you influenced some part of your society for the better? And hopefully this kind of course would have that ethos in it.
That's wonderful to hear, especially the part of your answer that you actually highlight the importance for university and a law school to contribute to policies and public discussions regarding hard issues that we needed to, in a way, confront as a society. So thank you very much, Professor. It was very nice for us and very helpful for us to hear your perspective on those subjects. And I think we had that for ending the interview, but I would like you to provide us with a final comment regarding a message that you can deliver for our students, especially because it's very common to our students to say to us that they are very concerned about the future of the legal field, but not only the legal field, about the future of their professions. Because, as you mentioned, who could foresee ChatGPT or things that we are dealing in terms of generative AI that actually create this scary feeling that we are sharing nowadays. So do you have a final message for our students regarding the time that we are living in and the future, to close the interview with that message?
Of course, I would just say, don't worry too much. There will be changes. We have similar conversations with medics who fear that they're all going to be turned into chatbots and dispensed with. But this is just not the case. Human beings are always going to be needed. And not, I mean, there may be opportunities. You should embrace the opportunities of the future but also take control of the situation. So you're utilizing the technologies in ways that remove the boring, mundane stuff and give you opportunities to really engage with the intellectually interesting and worthwhile stuff. And if we are not careful and we don't fully get to grips with this technology and become actual informed users of it, we may become victims of it, and we will end up doing the drudgery while they do all the interesting stuff. So be very careful, use it now, and find out how it's going to potentially help you. But recognize, obviously, there's going to be a transformation. You are the next generation. You're going to be doing law differently to the way that your predecessors have done. Lots of it will be the same, but some will be different. But embrace it and think ahead now about, you know, where will the things be easier for your life, and where would you like to devote your attention more to? And remember, at the end of the day, there are people to be dealt with when you're a lawyer, just like when you're a doctor. You have people with their anxieties, their fears, their trauma, their, you know, uncertainty. You know, all of these things that they're going to come to you with, or they may even have a very practical requirement, but they need a human being to mediate that. And that's very often a lawyer. I can go online, I could download a will writing pack, and I could write out my own will, but would I trust it? Probably not. Probably I want to go to a real lawyer on that. So just finding that human, unique selling point, as it were, or the unique characteristic that makes human beings valuable is really our priority in the next decade, I would say. But good luck to you, and yes, certainly don't worry.
Thank you very much, Professor. It was a wonderful interview. Thank you. And for our audience, see you next time. I invite you all to actually watch the videos from our project here, the Law and Technology series. Thank you. See you next time. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.